My mom forbade me from entering her room, where I used to work and earn as a freelancer. When I moved out, they asked for help. I'm Kevin, I'm 24, and I've been freelancing as a video editor ever since finishing college. I moved back home to Sacramento after graduation. Not the dream scenario, but it made sense. Rent was expensive, and staying with my mom gave me a chance to save money and build my client base. Plus, I wasn't just freeloading. I paid part of the rent, the electricity bill, and even covered her cell phone plan. I turned my childhood bedroom into a mini content studio with a ring light setup, a green screen, and dual monitors on a sturdy desk I bought secondhand but upgraded over time. That room became my office, my home base, and honestly, I was proud of what I'd built. For a while, it worked. Mom and I got along fine. She respected my work hours, didn't interrupt when I was editing or filming, and we shared the space well. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was manageable. I had structure. My clients were happy. I was starting to build momentum on YouTube. And then came Melissa. Melissa had been one of my mom's close friends for years, and she'd always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Not for any big reason. Just something about her was exhausting. She talked over people, treated every conversation like a performance, and had that passive-aggressive thing going where you never quite knew if she was complimenting you or taking a jab. Anyway, Melissa was going through a rough divorce. Her husband had cheated, moved out, and apparently drained some of their joint accounts. She showed up at our door with her 2 kids and bags in tow. Mom told me it would just be for a few weeks, while Melissa found a new place and got on her feet. I wasn't thrilled, but I said okay. What was I going to do? Say no to a woman in crisis and 2 little kids? I'd be a monster. Plus, Mom swore it was temporary. So I helped bring in the luggage and cleared out the guest room. The place was tight, but we made it work at first. The first red flag was the noise. I wear noise-canceling headphones most of the time, but that only goes so far when you've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old screaming their way through the house. They weren't bad kids, really, just chaotic. Constant cartoons blaring, toys everywhere, endless stomping up and down the hallway. My filming schedule took a hit immediately. I had to re-record takes over and over because of background yelling or some toy that suddenly made sounds like a dying robot. Still, I told myself it was temporary. A few weeks. I'd survive. Week 4 came, then week 5, and Melissa was still there. No sign of apartment tours, no job applications being submitted as far as I could tell. Instead, she started acting like the house was hers. She'd rearrange things in the kitchen and complain about how we needed better lighting in the living room. She even made a comment once like, "Kevin's setup is really impressive. Maybe you should turn the dining room into a full-time studio." As if I hadn't already carved out every inch of workable space in that bedroom. One afternoon, I came back from a grocery run and noticed the door to my room was wide open. I walked in to find Melissa's youngest sitting in my chair, mashing keys on my keyboard, with a juice box dangerously close to my editing console. My camera was on the floor, my headphones on the bed, and someone had clearly been dragging my mouse across the desk. I lost it, not at the kid, but at the situation. I called for my mom and Melissa. When I told them what happened, Melissa barely looked up from her phone. "They're just kids, Kevin. Chill." I looked at my mom, hoping she'd back me up. "He needs that equipment for work," I said, trying to stay calm. "That stuff isn't cheap. They can't be in there." Mom gave me this tired sigh and said, "Well, maybe if you didn't keep it so inviting in there, they wouldn't be so curious." That stung more than I thought it would. I wasn't making a jungle gym. I was working, and they both knew it. After that, I started locking my door, which only made things worse. Melissa started passive-aggressively suggesting that I was paranoid and secretive because I always had that door locked. Mom didn't say anything, but I could tell she wasn't thrilled either. She hated conflict, always had, and I was apparently the one making waves. By week 7, I was barely getting any work done. Melissa's kids had taken over the living room and hallway, and Melissa herself had taken over the kitchen like it was hers. Mom just tried to keep the peace, which usually meant placating Melissa and telling me to be more understanding. I overheard Melissa talking to my mom one night. She said, "Honestly, Kevin's been really difficult lately. It's not like we're asking for much. He's got a good setup. Maybe he could move into the garage if he needs quiet." I couldn't believe it. The garage? I looked around my room, the same one I was paying rent for, and felt like I was being slowly pushed out of my own home. So I sat down with Mom the next morning. I told her I couldn't keep doing this. I wasn't trying to be heartless, but this was impacting my work, my mental health, everything. I asked her point blank, "How much longer is this going to last?" She looked away and muttered, "As long as she needs, Kevin. She's family." I just nodded. I didn't say anything else. I knew then that nothing was going to change. That night, I started looking at sublets. I found a room in a shared house across town. It was small, and I'd have to adjust, but it would be mine. No screaming kids. No juice on my desk. No people treating my work like a phase. When I told my mom I was moving out, she looked shocked, like it hadn't even occurred to her that I might leave. Melissa, of course, didn't say a word, just sipped her coffee and stared at her phone. Mom cried a little and asked if I was really going to abandon her. I said I wasn't abandoning anyone. I just needed space. She didn't understand. A week later, I was out. I left the spare key on the counter, packed up my equipment, and drove away without looking back. That was 2 months ago. I haven't been home since. Mom texts sometimes. Short messages, checking in. She hasn't said anything about Melissa or whether she's still living there. I don't ask. I've got my space now, and I'm working again. Quietly, steadily, without interruption. That's all for now. At first, things were manageable. I kept telling myself it was just a few weeks and I could handle anything for that long. Melissa and the kids stayed in the guest room, and while the noise was definitely a constant presence, loud cartoons, temper tantrums, constant foot traffic, I found ways to cope. I wore my noise-canceling headphones all day, worked late into the night when the house finally quieted down, and tried to avoid the common areas as much as possible. It wasn't ideal, but I wasn't trying to make things harder on anyone. Melissa was going through hell, and I figured the least I could do was keep my complaints to myself. But then one Tuesday afternoon, I came home from a coffee shop where I'd spent the morning editing footage, and I immediately felt something was off. The hallway was unusually quiet, which wasn't normal lately, and as I walked toward my room, I noticed the door was wide open. My stomach dropped. I stepped inside and just froze. The first thing I saw was my bed. It was completely trashed, covered in candy wrappers, crumpled napkins, broken toy pieces, and juice stains that were already soaking into the sheets. One of Melissa's kids had apparently decided it was a trampoline because the blanket was half hanging off, and one of the pillows was on the floor with a shoe print on it. My microphone, the one I use for voiceovers and paid audio work, was shoved carelessly in the corner like some tangled piece of junk. My editing computer was on, and someone had opened a random video project. I could see changes had been made. My camera, which I always stored in a padded case on the shelf, was under the bed. Just under there. No protection, no case, lens facing down, next to an open box of goldfish crackers. I couldn't speak for a second. I just stared. Then something in me snapped. I shouted, "What the hell is going on in here?" and immediately heard the pitter-patter of feet down the hall. Melissa's kids were out of the room in a flash, and a second later my mom appeared, drying her hands on a dish towel like she had no idea what was going on. She looked into my room, then at me, and instead of the apology I expected, I got the most casual shrug I've ever seen. "Children need space," she said, like it explained everything. "Your room is the biggest, don't be selfish." I was stunned. Actually stunned. I pointed to the camera under the bed, the trash on the mattress, the open project on my computer, and asked her if she even understood what this room meant to me. I wasn't just sleeping in there. I was working, paying bills, building something. That wasn't just a bed. That was my studio, my office, my entire business operation. I told her flat out that they had no right to be in my space, touching my things, opening files, let alone treating my gear like a toy chest. She rolled her eyes and said I was overreacting. "They're just kids, Kevin. They didn't mean any harm. You're acting like they destroyed a car or something." At that point, I was shaking with anger. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her it didn't matter whether they meant harm or not. What mattered was that I paid rent for that room, I paid for the equipment in it, and I was never even asked if someone else could use it, let alone let 2 little kids treat it like their personal clubhouse. I told her it was disrespectful, careless, and totally unacceptable. She cut me off with, "This is my house, Kevin. You're not the only one living here. You don't get to dictate who uses what." That was the moment I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. She didn't care. Not really. She was more concerned about keeping Melissa comfortable than about protecting my ability to work and live in peace. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. I went straight back to the coffee shop with a lump in my throat and didn't come home until after midnight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words over and over in my head. Selfish. Dictating. This is my house. Like none of my contributions mattered. Like my work didn't count because I wasn't putting on a suit and leaving at 9 every morning. I didn't say anything the next day. I just shut the door, moved what I could of my gear into the closet, and worked in silence. But something had changed. I felt like a stranger in my own home. A tenant without rights. A paycheck with a bedroom. I had no idea what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. I didn't hold back. I stood there in the middle of my wrecked room and told my mom, as calmly as I could, that this wasn't just about some kids playing around. That camera under the bed? That wasn't a toy. That microphone in the corner? Not a toy. The editing PC that was still on and humming like it had been pushed to its limits? Not a toy. That entire setup, the lights, the stand, the soundproofing panels, the boom arm, the chair, even the damn cables. I had spent over $4,000 putting it all together. Piece by piece, job by job, over the course of 2 years. I told her if even one component broke, I'd be screwed. I couldn't just go to Best Buy and replace it all. My freelance work depended on that equipment, and if something shorted out or got yanked or spilled on, I wasn't just losing a gadget, I was losing my income. I said it plain. If that gear goes down, I stop getting paid. Melissa, who had wandered in while I was talking, let out this exasperated sigh like I was the one being ridiculous. She leaned against the doorframe and said, "Oh, come on, Kevin. They're just playing. You make it sound like they lit the house on fire." I looked at her, stunned. Just playing? Just playing on a $1,000 mic and a camera that had taken me 4 months of editing wedding videos to afford? I opened my mouth to respond, but my mom cut in first. "She's right, Kevin," she said, arms folded like a disappointed school principal. "You're being dramatic. They didn't break anything." I couldn't believe it. I asked them both if they even understood how risky it was to let kids mess with professional equipment like that. I told them I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have parents paying for my rent somewhere. I didn't have a 9-to-5 job with benefits. I worked from that room. Every invoice I sent, every client I kept, every dollar I earned, it all came from the time and energy I spent in that space. And now it was just open territory for kids to run through? But Melissa wasn't done. She straightened up, narrowed her eyes, and said, "You're so self-centered. You have no idea what kind of hell I've been living through. You think this is easy? Losing everything, being betrayed, having to move in with a friend? My kids don't have a yard to play in anymore. They don't even have their own rooms. We're trying to get by, and all you can think about is your precious equipment." I stood there speechless. My mom nodded in agreement and added, "You're acting like they vandalized your car. This isn't the end of the world. You're not being very understanding, Kevin." I felt my jaw clench. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just looked at both of them and said, "I am understanding. I've been understanding. I let your friend move in. I gave up peace and quiet. I worked around the noise. I didn't complain when they took over the kitchen and the hallway and half the house. But this is my room and my job, and I'm not going to apologize for protecting it." Melissa rolled her eyes again and muttered something under her breath about me acting like a victim. My mom didn't even defend me. Not once. That was the moment I realized I was alone in this house. After another tense argument, this time sparked by Melissa's older kid pulling a handful of cables out from behind my monitor, I decided I had to at least try to offer a solution. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't working properly, and every time I opened my mouth in my own house, I felt like I was being treated as some inconvenient obstacle in their little chaos bubble. So I approached my mom later that evening while Melissa and the kids were watching TV in the living room, and I calmly laid out a compromise. I told her I was willing to give up my room. Completely. They could have it. The kids could turn it into a playroom or sleep in there, or do cartwheels, or whatever they needed. All I asked was that I be allowed to move my equipment, the computer, the lighting setup, the camera rig, the whole workspace, into the guest room. It wouldn't be perfect, but I could make it work. It had a window, enough outlets, and if I rearranged things, I could squeeze in a desk and my chair. I said it straight. If I had a quiet space to work, I wouldn't complain about the rest. She didn't even hesitate. "No," she said, without even looking up from folding laundry. "The guest room is too small. There's no room for your stuff." I tried to reason with her. I reminded her that I only needed about 6 feet of clear wall and some floor space. I said I could downsize, store the green screen for now, maybe keep half my gear in bins when not in use. I said I would make it work because I needed to work. That was the point. She cut me off again. "This is my house, Kevin. I decide who lives where." That sentence hit me like a brick. Not even because of what she said, but how easily she said it. No pause, no consideration. Like everything I did here, paying for part of the rent, covering bills, paying for her phone, buying groceries. None of it counted. Like my voice didn't carry any weight just because I wasn't on the deed. I stared at her for a long second. I asked her, "So it doesn't matter that I'm helping with the rent? That I'm paying the electricity bill? That I've made this house more stable financially?" She didn't answer right away. She just said, "You're young, Kevin. You'll be fine. Melissa and the kids need the space more than you do." That was it. Just like that, my contribution meant nothing. I wasn't a partner in the household. I wasn't even considered part of the conversation. I was just the background noise. The guy with the job nobody took seriously. The adult kid who could be moved around like furniture because technically the roof wasn't in his name. I walked back to my room, my former room, apparently, and sat at my desk, staring at the monitor that was now slightly tilted after Melissa's kid had leaned on it. I looked at the audio interface I'd bought after weeks of saving, the camera I'd carried in a backpack through gigs all over the city, the lights I'd used to record content that had actually started picking up views. And I realized none of it mattered here. Not to them. My work, my space, my income, my needs, they were all disposable in my mother's eyes. A week later, it was official. Melissa and her kids had fully moved into my room. My bed had been stripped, replaced with sleeping bags and piles of toys. My desk was buried beneath children's books and markers, and my equipment had been pushed into corners or left lying against the wall like forgotten furniture. No one said it out loud, but the lines had been drawn. I wasn't allowed in there anymore, not even to grab my own stuff. It was surreal. I'd walk down the hallway, glance at the door that used to be mine, and hear the sounds of cartoons or Melissa scolding one of the kids. Sometimes I'd see my ring light casting weird shadows through the blinds, or hear the soft hum of my still plugged-in computer. My gear was still in there, thousands of dollars worth, but access to it, that was suddenly up for debate. I tried to be patient. I tried knocking, asking politely if I could come in to retrieve specific things, my tripod, a charger, my second monitor. Sometimes Melissa would let me in, but would stand in the doorway watching me like I was some kind of intruder. Other times she'd claim the kids were napping or playing, and it wasn't a good time. Once, she told me to write down a list of what I needed so she could see what she could bring out later. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Probably both. The final straw came one afternoon when I was getting ready for a client call. I had a last-minute revision to edit, and my good studio headphones, the ones with the noise isolation and flat response that I used for all my sound mixing, were still in the top drawer of my desk. I waited until things sounded quiet and figured I'd just slip in, grab them, and be out in 10 seconds. I opened the door slowly. One of the kids was sprawled out on the bed playing with action figures. The other was coloring on the hardwood floor, feet kicking against the base of my light stand. Melissa was lying on her side, scrolling through her phone like it was just another lazy afternoon. I stepped in and made a beeline for the desk. The drawer was still intact, and I had just pulled it open when I heard Melissa's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Don't you dare come in here." I turned, headphones in hand, confused. I just needed these. I wasn't touching anything else. She sat up, her face already twisted into that familiar mask of outrage. "This is not your room anymore, Kevin. I don't care what you left in here. You don't get to just barge in whenever you feel like it." I stood there stunned, my mouth half open, headphones clutched tightly in my hand like I needed to prove I had a reason to be there. I tried to explain, calmly, that these were my work tools, that I was in the middle of an edit, that I wouldn't have stepped in if I hadn't absolutely needed them. But she wasn't listening. She kept going, her voice rising, saying how stressful things were for her, how she was tired of feeling like a guest when she was already dealing with enough, how I needed to respect boundaries. I looked at her, standing there in the room I paid rent for, surrounded by my things, acting like I was some stranger crossing a line. And that's when it broke me. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just backed out of the room and closed the door quietly behind me. And then I sat on the stairs for a long time. Not moving. Not thinking. Just sitting there, feeling something crack inside me that I didn't know was still holding on. It wasn't about the headphones. It wasn't about the room. It was about the fact that I didn't belong in my own home anymore, and apparently, no one even cared. It didn't take long for everything to start falling apart. Without access to my full setup, my ability to work took a nosedive. I tried to adapt, I really did. I dragged my laptop from one coffee shop to another, trying to find quiet corners and decent Wi-Fi, so I could at least respond to client emails and do basic edits. But it wasn't enough. My laptop wasn't powerful enough to handle 4K video processing, and without my proper monitors, my color correction work looked off. Deadlines started creeping up on me, and I missed one for a regular client I'd been working with for months. He didn't even get mad, just said he'd find someone else. That hit me harder than I expected. Every day felt like a blur. I wasn't sleeping properly. I wasn't eating well. I was lugging gear in a backpack like a college freshman, just hoping I could find a quiet hour to get something, anything done. I couldn't keep up, and I knew it. The pressure was like a weight on my chest that never went away. I found myself snapping at people over small things, and there were nights I'd sit alone in my car, staring at the steering wheel, wondering how the hell things got so bad so fast. One afternoon, after yet another frustrating day of trying to export a file that kept crashing my laptop, I came home completely drained. I sat on the back steps for a while, just to delay going inside, because I didn't want to look at Melissa or hear her kids screaming through what used to be my walls. But eventually I went in, and I found my mom in the kitchen peeling vegetables like nothing was wrong. I told her we needed to talk. She gave me that wary look, the one she always gave when she knew a conversation was going to be uncomfortable. I said I couldn't do this anymore, that my work was falling apart, that I was losing clients, that I was drowning. I told her the coffee shop setup wasn't working and I couldn't afford to replace the gear I wasn't allowed to access. I said that I was trying to make this arrangement work, but it was destroying my livelihood. She didn't flinch. Instead, she said the same thing she'd been saying for weeks, like she'd rehearsed it 100 times in her head. This is my house, Kevin. If you don't like something, no one is keeping you here. That was it. That was her answer to everything. I stood there, staring at her, trying to wrap my head around the fact that I was pouring money into the bills, sacrificing my career, bending over backward to stay civil, and she still didn't see me as someone who deserved a voice in the house. I nodded slowly, swallowed the lump in my throat, and said, "Okay." Then I looked her in the eye and told her, "Either you give me back my room, or I'm moving out." She blinked, surprised. I don't think she expected me to say it. Maybe she thought I'd just keep taking it. Maybe she thought I'd cave like always. But I didn't. Not this time. I meant every word. She didn't take me seriously. Not even a little. When I gave her the ultimatum, either give me back my room or I'd move out, she just sighed like I was being difficult for the sake of it. Then she turned the conversation, like she always did, into something about her struggles. She started saying how tight money had been lately, how the utilities were higher than usual, how groceries were expensive now with more mouths to feed, and how she really needed my help to keep things running. She said it like it was a guilt trip wrapped in concern, like I was being cruel for even suggesting I might stop contributing. I listened, jaw tight, while she talked about needing my financial support like it was some kind of family duty. When she finally paused, I said quietly, "Support goes both ways, Mom." She didn't respond. I repeated it, louder this time. "You want me to help you? Fine. But where's the support for me? Where's the understanding that I'm trying to build something, and I can't do that when I'm not even allowed in my own workspace?" She looked away, wiped her hands on a towel, and gave me that tired expression she used whenever she wanted the conversation to end. Then she hit me with it. "Kevin, they have nowhere to go. Melissa is going through hell. Those kids have already lost their home. I'm not going to kick them out just so you can feel more comfortable." I just stood there staring at her, feeling like I'd been slapped. She kept going. "You're young. You can adapt. You've got your whole life ahead of you. You'll figure it out, like you always do." And just like that, my needs didn't matter. My work didn't matter. My mental health didn't matter. The sacrifices I'd been making, the bills I'd been helping cover, the professional momentum I was trying to protect, none of it was worth as much as Melissa's temporary crisis or her kids' comfort in my space. My role in this house had been reduced to that of a paycheck with feet. Someone old enough to endure being sidelined because he didn't have kids, or a sob story. And I realized then that no matter how many bills I paid, or how calm I stayed, or how many times I tried to talk like an adult, I was always going to come second. Always. After that conversation with my mom, I didn't wait around to see if she would change her mind. I knew she wouldn't. Something in her had already made the decision that Melissa and her kids came first, and no amount of calm reasoning or emotional honesty from me was going to shift that. So I went back to my room, the hallway outside it, technically, and opened my laptop. I started making a list of everything I'd need to move out. I looked at rental listings, scrolled through forums, emailed landlords, checked commute times to my regular gigs, and did the math on how much I'd need for first and last month's rent, a deposit, and utilities. Then I opened my bank app and started pruning. I canceled every subscription I didn't absolutely need. No more takeout, no more Spotify Premium, no more late-night impulse orders for gear I couldn't even access anymore. I made a budget spreadsheet and mapped out what I could realistically afford if I took on an extra editing gig per week. It was tight, but it was possible. Barely. Meanwhile, things at home only got worse. The tension was like static in the air, the kind that never goes away no matter how quiet everything seems. Melissa barely looked at me anymore, and when she did, it was with that thin-lipped expression people wear when they think they've been wronged but know they can't say it outright. She started speaking to me like I was some outsider passing through. Short answers, passive-aggressive little digs like "some people just don't know how good they have it," or "must be nice to have time to worry about headphones." The kids had turned my old room into a circus. I could hear it through the wall, jumping, yelling, things banging against what used to be my desk. Once, I passed by and saw my green screen being used as a makeshift tent. My old studio chair was covered in juice stains and stickers. The door was always shut now, and I wasn't allowed to open it. Even when I heard something crash inside and my gut told me it was probably a monitor or a light stand hitting the floor, I had to just stand there and walk away. My mom acted like I'd vanished. She stopped asking how my work was going. She didn't thank me when I sent her half the rent that month or paid the electricity bill like usual. No one asked how I was managing without a workspace or how I was dealing with losing 2 clients in 1 week. They just ignored me, like I was already gone, like I had decided to become invisible, even though I was still keeping the lights on. I slept on the couch when I had to, kept to myself, and left the house more often than not. I brought my laptop to parks, libraries, the corner booth at a fast food place that didn't care how long I stayed. It wasn't productive, but it was something. Every time I came home, it felt less like home. The people I was living with talked around me like I was a temporary inconvenience, a background noise. And still, I kept paying. Still covered part of the groceries. Still paid the bills. Still showed up, quietly, to the life that no longer had room for me. A week later, I found a listing on a community board for a room in a small house about 15 minutes away. It wasn't anything fancy, just a basic room in an older home with 2 other tenants I hadn't met yet. But it had a door I could lock, a small walk-in closet I could line with foam panels, and enough wall space to rebuild a stripped-down version of my studio. The rent was reasonable, the landlord seemed normal, and best of all, the space was mine. I didn't say a word to my mother. I didn't announce anything, didn't argue, didn't give her another chance to talk me down. I went to the showing, checked the outlets, took measurements for my desk, and signed the lease the same day. I gave the landlord the deposit in cash, told him I'd be moving in over the weekend, and left with a copy of the key in my hand and a weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying finally starting to lift. Back home, I kept my head down. I made lists, organized cables, wrapped up cords, and planned every step of the move in my head. Most of my equipment was still in the room that used to be mine, so getting to it was tricky. I waited until the kids were asleep and Melissa was in the living room watching TV with headphones. Then I'd slip in quietly, grab a piece of gear, wrap it in a blanket, and sneak it out to my car like I was stealing from my own life. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want to hear another lecture about being selfish or ungrateful. I just wanted to be gone. By Friday, everything was boxed and ready. I had a few more things to take in the morning, but the bulk of it was packed. My mic stand, my hard drives, the camera that had somehow survived the chaos without a cracked lens. I left the boxes in the trunk of my car and spent that last night on the living room couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell the last 3 months had even been. Late that night, I sat down across from my mom at the kitchen table. She was sipping tea, scrolling through her phone, acting like it was just another evening. I told her I was moving out in the morning. She didn't say anything at first, just blinked at me and tilted her head slightly, like she'd misheard. "You don't mean that," she said eventually, her voice calm, almost amused. "You're upset. You'll cool off. This will all blow over like it always does." I looked at her for a long moment. I wanted to ask what part of any of this she thought would blow over. The missed deadlines? The destroyed workspace? The fact that I hadn't had a bedroom in over a month? But I didn't. I just said, "I've already signed the lease." Her face changed then. Just a flicker. Something between disbelief and disappointment. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something about money or responsibilities or Melissa again, but I didn't let her. "I didn't want to fight anymore," I said. "So I made my decision. I'll send you my forwarding address if you need it." She didn't respond. Just stared at her tea like it might start explaining things on her behalf. That was the last time we spoke before I left. The next morning, I loaded the last of my boxes into the car and left without saying goodbye. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't leave a note. I just turned the key in the ignition and drove away from the house that had stopped feeling like home a long time ago. My new place wasn't perfect, but when I opened that door and stepped into my little room, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: relief. Real, full-body relief. The kind that comes when you know you don't have to justify your existence anymore. I spent the whole day unpacking, putting my desk together, carefully setting up my camera and mic, checking every cable, every input, every panel. It felt like starting over, but it was mine. The next day, my phone rang. It was my mom. I didn't pick up. A few minutes later, I saw the voicemail notification pop up, and curiosity got the better of me, so I listened to it. Her voice was tight, trying to sound composed but slipping in all the familiar cracks. She said she was sorry things had gotten tense. She asked if I could send over a bit for the electric bill, because she hadn't budgeted for the full amount without my half. Then she added something about how Melissa was still looking for work and that money was tight, just until things settle. I didn't respond. A few hours later, I got a text from Melissa. No greeting, no acknowledgement of anything that had happened. Just a casual, "Hey, do you remember the login for the streaming service? The kids are asking." Like we hadn't just spent a month pretending I didn't exist in the very house I was financing. Like nothing had happened. I stared at the screen, read it twice, then put the phone face down and walked away. I didn't answer her either, because now I saw everything clearly. It wasn't about family. It wasn't about helping someone in need. They didn't respect me. They didn't value me. I was convenient. A wallet with a name. Someone to carry the weight so they didn't have to. And when I needed even the smallest consideration, I was treated like a problem. They didn't care about what I built. They didn't care that I was trying. They only cared that I was useful. And the moment I stopped being useful on their terms, I became expendable. So no, I didn't respond. I chose myself this time. I chose peace. I chose stability. I chose a locked door, quiet nights, and the chance to rebuild on my own terms. And if they can't pay the bills without me, if Melissa has to figure things out without hijacking someone else's life, then that's their problem now, not mine. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I'd really like to know what you think. Did I make the right call? What would you have done in my place? Let me know.